Disco Ulysses instrumental from Vulfpeck's 2018 album Hill Climber is one of my favorite songs the band has released. The song features a uniquely Vulfpecky disco groove and pushes Joe Dart to the front, making him the main focus of many sections of the tune. I put out an admittedly inaccurate cover of the song about a month after the album released, but continued to dive into the tune and transcribe the entire part. This song, which I hold as one of the most technically demanding Vulfpeck bass parts, really shows off the strengths of Joe Dart in many ways that are easy to overlook. Like Glamour Profession, the first song that I analyzed in a video format, the bassline took much more effort than just transcribing to figure out what makes it work so well. In this video, as well as breaking down the original bassline, I'll be giving feedback to other covers to help highlight those hard to notice details that really sell the line. This is an analysis of Joe Dart's bassline on Disco Ulysses instrumental. This line can seem pretty simple, but Joe's adding in a lot of subtleties that help bring the line to life. Like in this part of the phrase, you can hear he's adding this little half-step trill, which I don't really know if that's the right word or phrase to use, but basically, he's doing this little half-step move at this part of the phrase. He also adds this little grace note towards the ending of the main phrase, which doesn't seem like much, but combined with the trill, it really brings the line to life and stops it from feeling robotic. He carries this technique into the verse of the tune, which we'll be breaking down next. So this is the part that requires a lot of chops in both hands to pull off. The most apparent difficulty here is the octave jumps in the right hand. In my original cover in 2018, I used this little baby technique where I split the disco octave up between my thumb and my index and middle fingers. This seems like a really good solution, but you immediately run into problems when Joe doubles up on the bottom note of the octave, which he does very often. My idea was that I could play the disco octave rhythm like this, which allows you to skip the massive index finger jump that you have to make when you play it the way Joe does. However, many times throughout the verses, Joe adds an extra 16th note to the bottom note of the disco octaves, which is impossible to play with just your thumb without doing some crazy Victor Wooten shit. So when I realized this, I started practicing disco octaves a lot in order to gain that finger dexterity. 2 exercises for this that I recommend are: play the Everybody Dance bassline with a normal right-hand technique. Bernard Edwards does the fingerpick thing, but playing it like this is a really good warm-up to get your right hand used to making that jump. And 2, play the Disco Ulysses first bass line with disco octaves on every note, like this. Once you get the right hand technique down, there's still a lot to work on in the left. The biggest challenge for me was giving the second 16th note in the disco octaves a full note length. Because of the large jump you have to make on the fretboard, it's very natural to leave some space there, but Joe fills almost all of that up. And just like the previous section, Joe adds in a bunch of these little slides and chromatic things that really liven up the bass line. The rest of the song repeats these sections until the final climactic full band thing. What I find really interesting about this section is that Joe's taking so many fills that he almost turns the section into a bass solo. There's so much good stuff in here that I want to break down a bunch of these fills. That doesn't sound like much, but that's the only part of the song when Joe doubles up on the bottom note of the disco octaves for every note of the climb up. For me, this is the most technically difficult part of the song, because instead of just your index finger having to make that jump, your middle finger has to make it as well. I love the variation Joe gives the line coming up. He gives every note of the line a disco octave and just sort of subtly adds to the overall growing busyness of the line. In this fill, Joe uses a technique of alternating between a pedal note and a climb up the scale. He uses this also in Deantown and Daddy He Got a Tesla. Alright, let's keep going. That is my favorite fill in the song, and maybe my favorite Joe Dart fill ever. It's got that great subtlety of the little grace note and the trill. It's fantastic. He adds in a cool little closing phrase there that if you want to take a closer look at the ending or any part of the tune, I have my full transcription of the song linked at the top of the description. So now I'm going to look into some of the most viewed covers of the song and give some feedback on what can be improved. This is the best execution of the verse bass line that I've found. No placement is great. They're adding in a lot of those little grace notes, and he puts in this pretty hip little phrase at the end of the climb up. However, I would reassess the note length you're giving that second 16th note of the disco octaves. To clarify, I'm talking about the stretch from here to here. Now, this is a massive stretch for your left hand to make, so it's very, very natural for you to shorten that last note to give yourself more time to make the jump. But in the recording, you can hear that Joe isn't leaving any space between those and giving that 16th note its full value. I would recommend practicing this bass line very slowly and really focusing on leaving your pinky pressed on the string for as long as you can before you make the jump to beat 2. Obviously, there has to be some space between those notes, but minimizing that space as much as possible is one of those small details that can really take your playing to the next level. Overall, great cover. On to the next one. This cover has a lot of the same faults that my 2018 cover had. In general, I was very rushy and on top of the beat, and while Joe isn't as laid back as players like Anthony Jackson, he's definitely a little behind the kick drum. Also, a lot of the funkiness of this line comes from the note length, which you're generally playing too short. Joe gives a lot of these chord notes a staccato feel, giving them the space of about an eighth note. However, you're playing them too short, almost cutting them off right after the attack. Now in the verses, the bass line requires your left hand to be jumping all over the fretboard. Because of this, muting your strings with your left hand can be pretty difficult, and you can hear some of that here. Because of these strings being left to ring open, there's some general muddiness through the bass line that isn't present in Joe's playing. To avoid this, try leaving your left hand fingers resting on the strings while jumping around, instead of letting them curl out like this. Other than that, you nailed the transcription across the board, and definitely did a much better job than I did on my first pass. Both of these covers are linked in the description below. So that's my breakdown of Joe Dart's playing on Disco Ulysses instrumental. Again, the transcription is linked right below the like button. If you have any feedback on this video or thoughts on other songs that could be analyzed, leave that in the comments below. This has been Disco Ulysses instrumental bassline analyzed, whatever. I'll be back soon with another video.